I'm a 15-year-old guy. I live in Germany now, but I'm originally from a small European country. What happened took place before I moved to Germany. Back in my country, we have school trips that usually happen at the end of 8th grade and last about a week. I've dealt with stalkers before, but nothing as intense as this. It was September in 2014, and I went on a field trip to an island with my class. I was 14 at the time. There was this girl, Jane. Jane used to be a normal girl up until that point. She was always kind of shy and really kept to herself, but everyone liked her. She was never bullied or anything, just a normal shy girl. We used to chat on Facebook a little bit, but nothing serious. I never really harbored any feelings towards her, neither in her favor nor against her. So back to the field trip. I smoked a couple cigarettes with my mates in our hotel room, and then we went outside. The teacher wanted to show us some plants that were specific to that area. Now, I've noticed that Jane was talking to me more often than before, and that she was always walking close to me, but I thought it was merely a coincidence. I didn't make a fuss about it. But as time went by, things had started to get worse. She started touching me, hugging me, and following me, respectively. On the third day, we went on a cruise to a nearby island, and during the cruise, she was sitting next to me. She had a camera and was taking pictures of me. I've had zero sense of restraint at that point since I was young and didn't think much of it. I noticed that she was taking a suspicious amount of photos, though, mostly of me, and I told her to calm down. Then she talked to me for about an hour, but she didn't say anything interesting. She was mimicking the Irish and British accents to me and basically blabbering stuff for approximately an hour. I was just smiling and replying with, "That's nice." In the following days, she had started to hug me and was making me feel uncomfortable, so one day I came to her and told her that we needed to talk in private. We went to the woods and I asked her if she was in love with me. She denied it and kept saying that there had been a misunderstanding, but I knew there was something off about her. Then she told me her life story. She said that her mother is a schizophrenic and that she's severely depressed about it. I felt sorry for her, but I still told her that touching was inappropriate. During our conversation, my mates wondered where I was and organized a search party for me. They found us eventually, but she had decided to stay behind and let me go. I have no idea what she was doing when I left. On one occasion, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. She came into our hotel room asking for water, as if there wasn't any water in her own room. However, when she got the requested water, she refused to leave the room. We got rid of her by telling her that we're going out to have some fun. The next day, the harassing got even worse. She would follow me around and hug me again. The peak of her abnormal behavior happened in the evening. I took a walk with a friend of mine and turned around briefly only to see her behind us. She was following us, I kid you not. I have never felt this kind of dread in my whole life. We made our way down the shore and hid behind a big rock next to a police station. "We should go inside and tell the police we have a stalker," my friend joked. Anyway, she couldn't find us and gave up finally. My best friend heard the story and went to her room to tell her to screw off. I was infuriated with him because it was rude of him, regardless of her actions. I'm usually not meek, but I thought that was horrible. Now I see that no matter how cruel that was, it was the right thing to do. I went to her room and apologized for my friend's actions. She was in her bed crying uncontrollably, and I calmed her down and went outside. A female friend of mine, Sarah, had invited me to come to her room so we could discuss something. I made my way to her room and saw two other girls there. We sat on the chairs on her balcony, and she had told me that Jane is a very depressed person and hated life. I was shocked when I heard that. So amidst our conversation, I winced. I raised my eyes and saw Jane, maybe 50 meters away, just sitting on a rock, listening to music and staring at me. She had a solemn look in her eyes. I suddenly felt dismay and told my friends that we had a spectator. They winced too, and we've decided to pry on her a little bit before backing out to the bedroom. "Just stay away from her," was the last thing Sarah told me before I left. To my luck, it was the end of our field trip and I finally got some rest. Weird encounters with her became fewer and fewer because she was often absent from school. There was even a rumor that she had ended up in a psychiatric institution, but I don't know what for, and I also have no proof of it. so I can't tell you exactly. Anyway, the point of this story is that sometimes you have to be rude so you can prevent something like this from happening. It may seem cruel or might even hurt the other person, but in the end, it's your life and you have to stand up for yourself and make sure that you're happy first. This was a great number of years ago. I'm starting to feel old by thinking of my school days now. We went away for the weekend on a school trip. This was my first time actually being selected to go. I was the class clown back in the day, often performing pranks on other classmates and teachers. So I was never picked for anything. But this year, I was on my best behavior and this was my reward. My pranking days were behind me. Before I go further, let me introduce the teacher, Mr. Smith. He was well known around the community, always organizing charity events to raise funds for the school and various other charities. He even took part in marathons to raise funds. Roll on to the school trip I spent with him. He was full of humor and funny and really kept us all motivated in the activities that we took part in. On the first night, however, I noticed that he'd gotten up from his bed on numerous occasions. I assumed this was due to the other kids misbehaving in the other rooms. Nothing happened to me at all that night, but the next day, my friend, who I also shared a room with, had dared me to perform a prank on the teacher. I told him my pranking days were over, but after some constant gestures from my friend, I decided to perform one last prank. Mr. Smith had left the room that night too. He was gone for a while. We had taken some scotch tape earlier that day, and when he left the room, we'd literally made a web out of the tape for him to walk into when he entered the door. We waited a long time for him to enter, and I found it a struggle not to fall asleep. I had just started to doze off when suddenly he entered the room, reacting to walking into the scotch tape. He knew instantly it was me. Me and my friends were hysterical, and we were lucky he saw the funny side too. However, he said to me, "You're very lucky this isn't the 70s, because I'd have caned you by now, and I would have enjoyed it too." And then he laughed. Nothing happened to me at all, but it wasn't until 4 years later that it came out that Mr. Smith was a pedophile. He had been arrested, and his arrest had made the headlines in our hometown. He had 44 cases of abuse towards children, mostly girls, against his name. 2 of the incidents had actually happened during that one trip that I'd gone on with him. I felt sick to my stomach at my near miss. He had also been charged with attempted murder as he tried to kill a victim that threatened to report him. Our entire hometown was disgusted by him, and even now, nobody mentions his name. He had done so much for the community, but all that he had done was just a way to gain our trust, so he could get away with all of his crimes for those years. He was arrested for more than 10 years, but was allowed out after 6, only for him to be arrested again under a new identity. He was eventually murdered in prison. I'm glad that nothing happened to me, but also shocked at how close I was to having something terrible happening to me. For context, we're female. When this happened back in mid-February of 2020, my friends and I were all 15. This takes place in Italy on a school trip we went on. The trip itself was alright, but being the dumb teenagers we are, we decided to push the boundaries. Our school had booked us into a pretty average hotel, low budget. So one night, 2 of my friends asked me if I wanted to sneak out with them during the night and go to the nearby beach. I'm generally quite sensible, but they kept persuading me until I finally gave in. We would only get one opportunity to do this, right? So we waited till about 1 a.m., messaging each other when to leave our rooms and meet in the corridor. There was only 3 of us. We didn't want anyone else to know, as they might snitch. The teachers were sleeping in rooms opposite of ours, so we had to be so quiet as to not get caught. I can remember still how worried I was that we would be caught and they would ring my parents. But we were successful and snuck our way down to the lobby. For whatever reason, nobody was at the front desk, so we hurried through the lobby and out the front door, not waiting around to get caught. None of us actually knew Italian, so this is possibly one of the dumbest things we could have done. We walked for about 2 miles down to the beach, all smug. We had actually managed to pull off our perfectly devised plan. The streets were completely empty. Not surprising considering it was 1 a.m., but It didn't stop that anxious feeling in the back of my mind. I knew what we were doing would get us in so much trouble if we were caught. We had to walk down hundreds of steps in order to actually get to the beach. Plenty of time to reconsider our actions, but we were stupid and kept going. Something I regret now. The beach was really quite beautiful. It was a full moon that night, and the beach was lit up in a beautiful soft light. We had the whole place to ourselves. We messed around for 10 minutes or so, and then my friends said they wanted to go in the sea. I was adamant I wasn't going in, despite their protests. So they told me to keep an eye on their stuff. We had only brought a few jackets and our phones. They rolled up their trousers and went knee-deep in the sea. I started filming them and taking pictures. The others would be so jealous, I remember thinking. Just wait till they see these photos. They spent about 5 minutes splashing around in the cold sea before they came back onto the beach and started stripping off more. I couldn't believe it. They were going to go swimming. They had the genius idea to go in their underwear. I couldn't stop laughing at this point. Looking back at it now, I should have persuaded them not to. I didn't understand the gravity of the situation we would soon be in. They both ran towards the waves and jumped in at the same time, screaming and giggling in the freezing water. I stood on the shore, laughing and filming them. While guarding their things, I got this eerie feeling of being watched. I can only put it down to instinct. Naturally, I put my guard up and I looked around. I'm glad I did, because God knows what would have happened if I didn't notice them. 2 men were sitting maybe 30 meters from us in the dark. Can't be sure, as I only noticed them for a second before turning back around, but it looked like one of the men was holding his phone up filming us. My stomach dropped. I called both my friends. I must have noticed the tone of my voice was completely shaken, despite my best efforts to be discreet. They walked up the sand towards me, dripping wet and freezing cold. I told them that 2 men were sitting behind us, watching us. I'd never seen them so scared. That's when the trepidation hit us. Nobody knew we were here. As far as everyone else was concerned, we were fast asleep in our hotel rooms. These men could easily take us down, kidnap us, and murder us. Nobody would ever know. I whispered to my friends that we needed to leave right now. I told them not to bother getting dressed, just to grab their stuff and leave as inconspicuously as possible. They agreed with no hesitation. At this point, I was really worried. The men must have known that we saw them. Despite our best efforts, nothing could conceal the raw fear we felt, and probably looked too. As we approached the steps, I made a quick glance behind us. A sweat broke out on my forehead. The men were now slowly walking towards us. My fight or flight kicked in, and I shouted at my friends to run. Barefoot and soaked, they scrambled up the steps as quickly as they could. We kept pushing. I didn't look behind me for fear of how close they could be. We didn't stop once we reached the top of the steps and onto the pavement. We were running on pure adrenaline at this point. Our legs burned. I looked down to see both my friends' feet were bloody, but they didn't stop. They didn't stop running until the hotel was in sight. I turned around again, and to my relief, I couldn't see the men. We walked through the entrance to the hotel. This time, however, there was a man at the front desk. He started speaking in Italian. We didn't understand him, so we kept walking. My friends leaving bloody footprints through the lobby. Once we reached the corridor, we made a mutual vow to never tell anyone about that night, and we all went back to our rooms. The man at the front desk must have told our teachers that he saw us at 3 a.m. walking through his hotel, leaving bloody footprints everywhere, because that morning I awoke to a loud banging on our door. For the sake of the story, I'll call her Miss Smith. Miss Smith was shouting at everyone, asking who it was that left late last night. Of course, everybody was confused, and I didn't dare speak up. Neither did my friends. After several speeches were made about the severity of our actions and how they were going to find out who it was, I was terrified. My 2 friends finally spoke up and admitted it was them. Thankfully, they left my name out of it, which I'll forever be grateful for. The teachers were furious, as you can imagine. They received phone calls at home, and they had to delete all pictures taken that night. I always think back to how that night could have ended, how horribly wrong it could have gone, and despite it being one of the dumbest things I've ever done, I'm glad I decided to go, because it terrifies me to think what would have happened to my 2 friends if I wasn't there to spot those men. I wasn't expecting to run into my ex-boyfriend during our school's annual field trip. And by running into him, I mean getting stuck on the janky ski lift halfway up the mountain. He wore an amused, if slightly annoyed expression, hand in his hand, with his new girlfriend Hannah. Fee, my current boyfriend Wes, was squeezing my hand for dear life. When I risked a glance at him, he had paled significantly, tugging his woolly hat over his eyes. In such an enclosed space with minimal distance between the four of us, I could see why Wes was freaked out. When a particularly sharp gust of wind rocked the ski lift and I stumbled into my ex-boyfriend, I realized it was time to panic. Especially when Hannah squeaked, dumping the dregs of her hot cocoa all over Wes. I reached into my pack for the emergency water I kept in a flask, but my hands only found my phone. Wes shot me a frenzied look, hot cocoa dripping down his face. I slowly shook my head and let out a soft whine. Fuck. Wes buried his head in his knees, trembling. Hannah laughed, bending down to help Wes to his feet, but he shuffled back. Get away from me. Hannah rolled her eyes. Oh my, Wes, it's literally cocoa. Don't be such a baby. It's not just hot cocoa. I had already noticed my boyfriend go slack. Wes's hands fell to his sides, his head hanging. It's hot, I whispered, my breath catching. Get back. I was already pawing for anything cold, dropping to my knees to scrape snow from my boots, but it was too late. When he lifted his head, my boyfriend's eyes were unseeing, his lips quirking into a monstrous grin. My ex grabbed my hand. What the heck is he doing? I thought. When splashed with hot water, Wes... I choked on my words when his arm whipped out, wrapping his fingers around Hannah's neck and slammed her head first into the glass. I heard the sound of her neck snapping, but he didn't stop until she was unrecognizable, a pulsing red smear dripping down the pane. With a hysterical giggle, large elongated fangs protruding from his mouth, he twisted the boy's head from his torso like a bottle cap, ripping his spine out with one brutal tug. When blood pooled at my feet, I stepped back, reached into my pocket, and pulled out my emergency supply of ice water, dousing it over Wes's head. The change was almost instant, his teeth retracting. He blinked water from his eyes, darkness bleeding from his iris, revealing a human brown once again. What? Wes stared down at his blood-slicked pants. What did I grabbed them, pulling him to a clumsy kiss, teasing my hot flask over his head. Good boy, I chuckled. Alyssa, who called me a slut, is next.